Welcome to the show, everybody. We're trying, new and creative ways of getting audio cleanly and fed to Chicago and back. And it's a curious endeavor sometimes. As I am in Las Vegas, Johnny is in Chicago. Our dear friend Philip Ittner will be joining us from Ukraine. He, like Malcolm Nance, is returning stateside, I think, starting next week or the week after. And that in and of itself will be an adventure, because I'm going to see if in that time period, depending on how long he's here, we can do an actual in-person meetup. What I do know about Philip is that he has, family in Michigan. There is a chance he will be traveling there, in which case I would make a special trip to Chicago, and we would, I guess, kidnap him and then take him to Chicago, and we could all be in studio in one fell swoop, and it'd be a lovely thing. And then we do a 9-hour live stream, much to the chagrin of Devin and everybody in Chicago.
Now, there's some talk about my shirt already. If you notice,
if people are on the live stream, this
is Flora.
Yeah,
I just got this. It was a surprise gift in the mail from a secret admirer.
Let me describe this for the people out in Radio Land. Remember, radio is the theater of the mind. Johnny Million is wearing a curiously floral button-down Hawaiian shirt style thing, which I don't want anyone to think is part of some sort of weird cult or some offshoot. Yeah, offshoot of the Ku Klux Klan or the Proud Boys or anything, because they try to do these meme clothing
so quickly.
It did terribly. And the one thing that we know will keep you out of the woods, because you get lost in the woods wearing that.
Yeah,
especially in the springtime. I suppose we'd be able to find you in the summer when everything's dry, but in the spring you'd be lost amongst the flowers. But on Johnny Million's floral shirt is his cat Flora, printed on the front and resting comfortably above his heart.
Yeah, she's got her RBF on there.
She does? Oh yes,
yeah.
Right. So this is now we're gonna have to up our game on the live stream clothing, and it's gonna be it's just gonna be a battle of attrition. Like
Somebody
next week,
if I got a new tattoo. I did.
Yes, and Johnny Million was lucky enough he's got one Rip Spider-Man tattoo on his left arm. He was able to go and get the other one. He was making an appointment to do it. I have unmarred skin of any sort. Hello. I'm a complete tabula rasa. I'm a blank slate, rare amongst my generation.
I have to inspect this on a semi-regular.
That's right.
basis.
Yeah. Yes. Because the Guinness Book people don't believe me. So they allow me
trust me.
They allow me a visual spotter to come in. This is talk about this descalated quickly. Good morning, Johnny Million. I'm happy to be here with you, my friend. It has been yet another loony week of politics and craziness. I think one of the things, there are a couple of things that got brushed under the rug this week. With Patsy Baloney was, sat down, the former chief White House counsel, sat down yesterday with the January 6th committee for 8 hours.
Holy moly.
8 hours. Now, if had it been anybody but Patsy Baloney, it would have. I would have said that's a lot of pleading the fifth. But apparently, he has made some arrangement with elements of his discussions with the January 6th committee about where he believes as White House counsel, his duty to the president as far as executive privilege ends. Because in many ways, he would be the guy that would tell the president in moments, this won't cover our butts. If we start talking about this, you and I, the beloved Chicago actor Dennis Farina, who was in a myriad of movies, Midnight Run especially, where he's talking to his attorney in that movie, and the attorney's like, we can't do this. Send an emissary. will get caught. Like, he's trying to keep the mob boss within the bounds of what legal, even gray area protection he can give him. And that's where Dennis tells him to sit down, have a bologna sandwich, and STFU. So in many ways, that seems to be the Trump plan as well. However, Patsy Baloney, sorry, I have to do that.
You had to.
You know, the birth of that, of course, if people have been watching, is that Pat Cipollone, the former White House counsel, has a name that triggers closed caption, and it scrambles to find something. Yes. And there was Pat's Abalone. There was a there was a myriad of variations. And
Patsy Baloney, Pat's Abalone. I would like to see Pat's
people
Abalone.
in the chat room will know they've seen a bunch of these. This is and by the way, I don't want to miss. I think I just looked at the chat so we can bring this up, and our beloved Hal Vickery has been very supportive right out of the gate, it seems, today. And Lisa Miyamura, thank you as well for the super chat. You can support the show via super chat or become a Patreon supporter, patreon.com/AlSparks. We do this CPT show gratis, so any help is welcome. Even if it's as simple as going to infotainmentwars.com and subscribing to the YouTube channel. It requires no other effort than a minor click, and you do thousands of those a day. So, yeah, passable. Yes, there's a bunch of them coming up. Pasta bologna, passable only.
Oh, I like passable only.
Yeah, Pat's macaroni, Pat's abroni, Patsy Maloney.
Pets of belonging?
Pets of belonging was an actual one that showed up.
God.
Yes. All right. Now we're getting into the weird silliness. I mean, we do live in a simulation, and it has gotten, someone has hacked it and hooked up a silly algorithm to it. And so a lot of this stuff is coming up. So part pepperoni. Now you guys are just making them up. All right. Baba Baloney. This is not Howard Stern. Quit it. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about what what the biggest concern is for Trump in that stuff, and an even bigger nightmare for the Republicans happened this week, and it certainly wasn't TYT. We'll be back right after this.
Attention, stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Oh my God!
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. So this is it's an adventure in live audio mixing. I'm just I'm throwing down, but at least we're getting some of the audio through now to the live stream at fwank.com, FWANQ.com. That'll send you to the Twitch channel, and you can subscribe there if you're in our window of gamer boomer audience in the algorithm. No. So obviously the biggest nightmare for Fox News and Newsmax and Trump and all his argument is, of course, the jobs report that came out this week, which threw a monkey wrench in everybody's predictions, in their doomsaying. We added 375,000 jobs last month. It is 380,000. We were down 20,000 from the month before, but we are literally running out of people to hire. There are and the biggest complaint from Fox News this week, and it was beautiful. Like, if there's ever like a classic Fox News attempt to take dinner and turn it into excrement without actually ingesting it, Fox News complaint is all these open jobs. We have too many open jobs in the United States. Okay, let me explain something. When people have been fighting depressed wages for decades because there were not enough jobs and more people fighting for them, once you get too many jobs and not enough people, that's when wages start to go up to match, in many ways, what they should have been growing to slowly over time. So there's a shock to some of the economic system when it happens all at once, but it's not raising to a level that it's like, absurd and killing the currency, because the dollar is stronger than ever. Every single marker that the doomsayers are saying, while we are dealing, of course, along with the rest of the world, with post-COVID supply shock related price increases in the CPI, it is not what we would say classical inflation. Never has been. There's an argument that most of the stories we've been telling about inflation in the country over the last 4 decades, maybe 5, have been really just CPI responses to a jackup in oil prices. If you want to go back and look, every time we've had a major economic problem in this country, the dot-com bubble might be the only one that doesn't qualify, but it didn't cascade or cause inflation. It was just a stock market related thing. But anywhere else that it actually affected consumer prices and the experience that the average person was having, it was always preceded the year before by a spike and a crash in oil prices. A weird ride of oil prices, largely revolving around an artificially high rise. OPEC, the wars in the Middle East breaking out, driving the price up. And of course, right now, what we're going through with Russian oil being removed from the market and creating a situation where we've got less oil available. And Johnny, by the way, while we're doing this in the front, if you see any of the super chats, we want to be able to read those on air or say hi to anybody. If you see those going through, kind of like we do with them, be nice to bring those up if I miss them, just because it's blazing. Blazing. Nina Ruby, thank you so much. She sent us a sticker saying you're amazing, because you can send stickers on YouTube. It's lovely. It's like I've died and gone to preschool, but it's lovely. The biggest issue this week that they have is that this points towards the hawkish Fed, which is what everybody says, raising the interest rate by 75 basis points, which is 0.75%, aiming for the end of the year for interest rates to be around 3%. Now, back in when I was a kid, housing prices were a lot lower. You and me, Johnny Melly. Now when you were a kid, you were in, before we met at the age of 14, 15. So before that, you and I lived in distinctly different economic strata, especially in terms of real estate. Because, you lived in Northbrook or Field?
Northfield, yeah.
Field, yes. I always get them mixed up, unless I'm driving through them. Yeah. And the real estate values in Northfield versus the real estate values in Peaks Mill, Kentucky, drastically different. I'm just going to say the amount of the inventory, the real estate inventory, and the investment property potential of both of those places, vastly different. And yet, one of the things they had in common was a correspondingly relatively high interest rate. Depending on when your parents bought that house or whatever, the interest rate was somewhere around 10, 12%, maybe even, I don't know if how far it goes back, maybe even 19% in crazy times. I mean, it
was like buying a house on a credit card.
Yeah. And right. And the irony is that it has effectively, the interest rate over time has crashed and real estate prices have gone up. And there is a balance to be had there, because the biggest investment people have. And if you can have a measured rise in the value of a home, that's how people build wealth over time. And that's a good thing. And so you want prices to go up as an investment over time to a certain extent. But the spike in them and the move in of investment, groups like BlackRock and others buying up houses and using them as rental properties have taken the inventory off the market, and so those prices continue to jack up. And the only people who can afford them are people who can walk in with cash and buy them outright. Mm-hmm. Even in a situation where interest rates are minuscule compared to what they were when you and I were kids.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's almost nothing a lot of people could do getting that first home unless they wanted to get it in a demilitarized zone, or it was the murder house on the block and nobody wants to move into it. It's like something out of a Pixar film about a house on the block kids won't go into. Or it's great, little lead paint, some asbestos, and the last owner was a lunatic who planted mines in the yard. Other than that, it's a unique fixer-upper opportunity, right? These are the only chance you have.
Yeah.
So as interest rates are starting to climb, we are seeing a clamoring on Fox Business, especially, about the American housing market is crashing. And by crashing, houses that were overpriced by $150,000 that by no means should get that much money are dropping their prices by $40,000, where they are still overpriced by $110,000.
So
and then they're selling.
Real estate crashing mean that the profiteers are struggling?
That's where I'm getting to. This is the beautiful part. And this is why you're going to see a lot of, like, we have to get Biden out of there now. His plan is going to destroy America. Now, why are there big specific interests? I mean, there's a lot of different groups that are hating on this dude, not just because he put the first black woman on the Supreme Court. There are a lot of people who have investments, let's say, that are going to be diminished slightly, not bad, but slightly, by some of these policies. Now, what was the big change that happened that caused the crash that we're seeing as the Fed raises basis points and tries to normalize this balance between investment, your home value going up over time, so that eventually maybe when you retire, you sell it for a little bit more and you can add that to your Social Security and you got something to coast into the grave on, right? That's the old plan. So the profit margin on a rental house or a property for most of these big companies per property is about 4.7%. And it's shaky ground. You got to deal with renters. Sometimes they come and go. Sometimes the property is empty. If you can't keep somebody in there consistently, that vacillates. That drops, down to 4%. So that's the decision they make. They buy these houses and they go, we're automatically going to make 4%, 4.7% profit on these things. And that's great. That's enough because most like Target retail stores make somewhere between 2.5 and 3% profit on stuff. I know everybody thinks it's 60% because they think the markup is the profit, but there's employees and buildings and zoning and taxes and blah, blah, and that. Okay, so that 4.7% number is now lower than the bond yield for long-term bonds for some of these as the interest rate goes up. And a bond, you don't have to worry about the renter wrecking the place. Nobody throws a party and burns down their bond. Nobody commits a crime in a bond that later on you can't sell it because nobody wants to live in the bond, in the murder bond. This is one of the big switches. And this is a tipping factor that in many ways the American real estate market has not seen in decades. And so investors are trying to get out of these properties that they were sure were going to give them 4.7%, and that was higher than they could get with bonds and other stuff, and that they were going to sell it at this exorbitant number because look at the market going up. And that's what creates a bubble. It's not people. It's not individuals. The tech bubble was not crashed by Robin Hood style investors deciding they thought it was fun to have GameStop stock. That's not how those things work. It's when these folks go in that have no interest in the actual use of any of these like substances, whether it's a stock, whether it's real estate. They're not going to live in the house. They're not even going to put a family member in the house. They're not buying a house for them and their kin and then their grandkids. They're buying it to rent or take off the market to raise the value of the other houses they own in the area. These kind of targeted things. And these are not, by the way, largely American investors. They are multinationals. They are largely overseas. And we got to take a break. And a bunch of them are Russian. And a bunch of them are Chinese. And all of a sudden, these Russian and Chinese millionaires who've been sneaking their money out of the country under the radar of their own tax system and their own legal system suddenly need that cash all of a sudden. And what did we get? I'll tell you right after we come back. Honestly, this is I just am enjoying this. I'm just savoring this. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome back to the House Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I think we fixed it. I mean, I was talking economics and scrambling to fix an audio issue at the same time. This reminds me of Albert Brooks in, I think it was in Network, was it? Where he's really aggravated that William Hurt is the anchor person because he's this handsome guy with blonde hair.
Broadcast
and
news.
He's sitting there and he's going, he's saying, I think, what was his? He was reading while listening to music and humming along with it, and in that he was somehow that was. Let me see if I got. Hold on. Do I have you, Johnny, in here? Hold on. I need
I don't
now.
think so.
No, there you are. Yeah, I hear you now. Okay.
Oh,
good.
okay. It's broadcast news.
Yeah, thank you. It was broadcast news where he's going, I can hum while I'm reading, which means he's really smart. That was one of the things. He was like, I can, if you can whistle and read at the same time and actually take in that's like next level thinking. So he's sort of bragging how smart he was because Hurt was this pretty dumb guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no switching channels, but it'll do. And if you haven't seen Switching Channels, that's Burt Reynolds and Christopher Reeve. And what's her name? Turner. I'm blitzing on her name. Anyways, it's a comedy, basically higher comedy than that. It's basically we go network, broadcast news, then we go to Switching Channels, and listen just the conversation of Christopher Reeves talking about how he highlights his hair to add a certain kind of bronze to it because it wasn't too brassy. Is genius alone. So I mean, it's beautiful. Anyway, so we're back on the air.
Blonde. Is that what that was for?
Yes, that's what it was. So in many ways, and it's hard. Listeners in Chicago, I apologize if I'm jumping into the middle of a conversation that we were having, and I'm just going to basically, if it's cool, Chicago, I'm going to go straight to the end of the hour since we sort of had an accidental break. If that's all right with you guys, we'll just ride it straight out so we can have an uninterrupted flow. Just let me know if that's cool. And the numbers coming out this week reflect a growing stability over time that will have fits and starts because it was so bent the other way. Of wage growth for the American worker across the board, a stability of, sort of the job ladder in many ways, because of the pro-union movements by the Biden administration, and a recognition that we as a country can either have more kids or take in more immigrants for these jobs of the future that will be there by these job openings instead of just even automation can't remove the jobs that need to be replaced. So people are being able to ask for a little bit more money. And the story that the Republicans have been telling for the last, God knows, I mean, forever, as long as I can remember. And I even arguably bought into it at one point, was this concept that the Fed prints money. And when there's too much money in the system, prices go up. And we dumped during COVID, we turned on the money printer and we brrred cash like one of those dollar bill guns all over the public. We made it rain on the populace.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're so flush. Try not to laugh. The public is so flush that
How flush are they?
Quit it. They're so flush they can wear tidy bowl as a hat. No, they're so flush. Like my buddy Murray Valeriano's, my favorite joke of his, I bought a toilet brush. I'm going back to paper. Those things itch. So they've been telling this money printing story. It's a good joke. They've been telling these money printing jokes jokes. It is a joke. These stories for so long that people have essentially bought it. And the irony of it is that while there was a certain amount of liquidity injected into people's bank accounts during COVID directly, it, like all direct resource-based payments, went right into the system again. It bought groceries. Some people saved it. Some people paid off debt. But people are like, that's not a useful use of stimulus. Well, yes, it is if you're not using UI for it, for example. So you can balance that payment and not go, well, now I've got money coming in, but I've got to pay this, or my phone's going to get shut off, or I'm going to lose my credit card, which is how I shuffle payments sometimes, or I'm going to lose the rotating loan my business has. And small businesses that were smaller than some household incomes could get enormous loans, and some households that had bigger debt than those, as they were putting kids through college when this stuff happened, and they leveraged it against the future is steady and relatively bright, and then this thing happened, they were suddenly on their heels. So this money that flowed into the system didn't magically just they didn't just sit on it like Scrooge McDuck, just throwing it into the air, going, or start wiping their nose with it, like the end of Dumb and Dumber. Remember when they're crying watching commercials?
Yeah.
Right? The people used it for the things they needed. And it went right back to this. And it made, by the way, a lot of the billionaires you're hearing about, it made some of those billionaires that made a lot of money. One of the ways that they made it was twofold. The biggest one, obviously, was Jeff Bezos and Amazon and delivery systems, Postmates, Grubhub, all those things, because they were uniquely suited to a circumstance we found ourselves in. And in many ways, they will be an ongoing element of American life forever. Home delivery, people are enjoying that part. But as we've come back, retail is opening at fits and starts. And where are the jobs that they can't fill? In stores, because people want to go to those stores but not necessarily work in those stores. So there's a balance being made in what you pay for people in those stores. And this is a balance that should have been played out slowly and incrementally since 1990. But business pressure and, quite frankly, Democrat and left-leaning solutions that sort of balanced it out, because there was intransigence on the Republican part, and you can't let people starve, so you got to solve it with other elements, economic support in other areas, especially for people below the poverty level, or raising the poverty level and increasing it over time instead of allowing that wage growth. There's many ways, like the story you used to hear about how people didn't get wages, but they got credit. Credit started booming in the 90s. And it took the pressure off of business to raise people's incomes, because they didn't necessarily need cash on hand to buy the creature comforts that they were seeing and wanting. And then payments on phones and those kind of things over time, or the rotating of getting phones, which is one of your biggest, non-house, non-car investments these days, was spread out over the cost of your house, over the cost of your phone and your plan, essentially. So each of these elements kind of in their own way caused like a positive depleting of wages over time. But because there weren't these jobs available and you didn't have a choice, if you needed the job more than they needed you. And we're in a unique situation because, and it's interesting to me that the Republicans don't seem to notice this. We lost over 500,000 Americans in a year. And a lot of those people weren't retirees. A lot of them were holding positions. They were working in the world. And many of them had family members that were traumatized by this. And this cascade effect that happened through the economy that took people out of the workforce, or not to mention the possibility that long COVID has an actual material statistical impact. All of those factors have left, and the growth of the economy, this, Biden reshoring factories at the fastest clip in American history, has put us in a situation where there's more jobs than people.
Oopsies.
And for investment-oriented business, for regular business, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you're going to be paying more, so you can expect more from your workers in that regard as far as quality, even at the mid-level. And so they know this, and people kind of show up and like, wow, I'm making this money sounds right to me. This is something I can use. And this transitory inflation, which we are experiencing as a year-over-year problem, is going to stabilize. It is, as it always has. It's not going to. We're not going to Venezuela. They didn't turn on the money printers. That is a ghost story they're telling people. And as it stabilizes, the wages are going to stay. You're not going to take a cut in pay of that 5.1% wage growth that we saw last month, which is, long overdue and not extraordinary and not in any way an example of, oh my God, people's wages had to go up 35% just to get people to work, because UI was still being like that. The story being told on Fox News is so comically over the top that this week when the jobs report came out, when they must have like an anything to hide Biden's successes war room. I mean, they're still talking about Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah. In the middle of all of this, Wes Webb is giving away House Parks memberships left and right.
Oh, thank you so much, Wes. That's fantastic. Wes, that's lovely. His only money, thank my dead dad. Oh, good Lord, Wes. Thank you so much, brother.
Attaboy.
I'm after all these audio issues, I was momentarily speechless on an organic level. Thanks, Wes. And thanks everybody who supports the show. Our patrons, we wouldn't be able to, next week, I will be in Cleveland doing the show. And then I'll be doing my live stream in Cleveland and Kentucky as I'm traveling with family, taking my, as we take our kid on the grandparents tour and the cousins tour, which we have to do, we do every summer. We don't have to. We do it because we love it and he loves it and we want to be there. But in that process, I pull this whole rig together and make and duct tape everything together and make it work. And God bless the long-suffering CPT for dealing with me in those things. But it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for our patrons jumping in early in the show and helping us stay in existence because of COVID. And this is another example of that collapse, that falling apart that everybody experienced at the same time. The money printing story is sort of I would say, it's the Republican Party and those kind of economic theorists, the people who, business over humans crowd, that this is their way of saying, being angry about the bailouts. Like when Democrats were angry that some banks were giving bonuses and people were getting bailed out, during the 2008 crash and too big to fail, all that kind of stuff. You can remember the anger you had about that. And you were like, this seems weird. Why wouldn't you help people directly and not these institutions? Exactly. Now, there's an argument to keep those institutions floating because they don't just keep our economy afloat. They also keep the economies of many other nations afloat. And whereas we might be able to inject money directly into the accounts of human beings, they won't. And so if all of our financial institutions collapsed, people starve to death in other countries. It's that connected. So there's a reason for keeping those things up. That said, that anger about the bonuses and all that kind of stuff that people felt, that's basically how the Republicans feel about the idea that people got extended unemployment insurance during a pandemic when no one could work and there was no clear way out. When we didn't even have a vaccine yet. They didn't have, halfway through the first month trial, they're like, I don't know why people aren't just making out in public. There's a distinction between the idea that there's too much liquidity in the market and therefore inflation is caused by the American consumer and the reality of the world. And what's happening in the world right now, I'm looking at the clock, so I make sure, because I'm totally off the zone of it. The reality of the world is that companies and countries that pay bonds, pay like interest payments, or on debt that they have taken from other people and from the United States, they do it in U.S. currency. They do it in dollars. And there aren't enough of them for them to make their bond payments. They are scrambling to get U.S. dollars because nobody wants anything else. They don't like, even euros aren't a backup. The only thing that isn't running on the US dollar right now is the Chinese real estate market, which is worse than 2008 and is going to have a cascading effect across that economy that none of us can fathom. And ironically, in a time when China decided to isolate itself, remember all the clamors like we should just get out of the world and stop globalizing and move inside. It's almost as if they were quoting the CCP's business model, because that's what China has been doing over the last 10 years. They have been removing themselves from the rest of the world. A lot of the techno theft that they've been accused of is not because they're going to steal your camera or your computer ID or whatever and sell it on the market. They're just going to steal it and sell it inside the country. Just have all that stuff. Just develop, they don't just assemble it there, steal the plans, build it there. And then when they shut off their economy, they'll just use the stuff. Because at a certain point, AI will do most of the programming. It'll improve on itself. That's the theory. But they did it too soon. And it's a nightmare scenario for them. And it's what Republicans in many ways have been asking for this entire time. And the irony is that it didn't play out that way. And they're panicking, not because we're not going through the same difficult situation that all these, they're panicking because their predictions aren't playing out in a timely fashion for the midterms.
Right.
And so get ready for 2 months of Hunter Biden and the election was stolen, because they don't want to talk about the fact that if Democrats get 2 more senators, we can codify Roe v. Wade. If Democrats get 2 more senators and maintain our and expand, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to expand our numbers in the House. We can codify Roe v. Wade. We can actually get a version of at least the pieces of Build Back Better through on reconciliation, individual parts of it, not the whole of it. That's got to be the goal. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Joining us next hour is Philip Ittner, live from Ukraine. I think he popped in for a second and then he popped out, so we'll get him over the course of the break. And by the way, bless Chicago and their long-suffering dealing with the tech audio issues this morning. I adore you. I love you, and I want to have your babies. We'll be back.
We love you too.